Welcome to NGIT Math Podcast today. My name is Tao Ling, and I will try to explain the definition of square root today. So, um, what is a square root? Well, you must have learned what the square is. So, 4 square is 16, right? So, 5 square is 25, and also 6 square is 36. Okay, so the definition of a square root is just the opposite of that. So if 6 square is 36, then the square root of 36, which you write it like this, will simply just be 6. Okay, so following the same reasoning, the square root of 16 will be 4. And the square root of 25 will be 5. Okay, so that's one definition. So that's the definition of square root. So now we have to get into some technical details of a square root. So you will never get a square of a negative number. That means even if you have negative 5 square, right, you will still have a positive 25 because negative and negative cancels out. I mean, they become positive. So there's no way after you have a square, you will have a negative number. So that will mean there's no such thing as a square root of negative 6, let's say, at least not in the real number system. So this would not exist. Okay, so that means when you have a square root, there's no number, there's no, you cannot have a square root of a negative number. Okay, like negative 7, that doesn't exist. Negative 25, that still doesn't exist. Okay, now so this is one thing that there is no square root of a negative number. So this is the first thing you have to pay attention to. The second thing is that, well, we know that 4 square is equal to 16, right? And also negative 4 square is also 16. So that means if we do the inverse, right, the square root of 16 is equal to 4, and it's not negative 4. Well, you may ask, why is that? Both 4 square, both 4 and negative 4 square gives you 16. So if the square root of 16 is opposite of that procedure, why is the square root of 16 is only 4 and not negative 4? Well, that's because mathematicians defined the square root of x always to be of x squared always to be the absolute value of x. So that means they always pick the positive one. Okay, so when they do the square root of number, they always, even though the reverse of that reaction, even though there's always two numbers, one positive and negative number, and the square of those numbers will give you 16, let's say. When you do the square root, you always only pick the positive number, not the negative one. Okay, always the positive one, not negative one. So this is the second thing you have to notice: the square root is always positive. Okay, so let's review that. The square root is a reverse operation of the square. Okay, the square root is the reverse operation of the square. And the two rules is that one, there is no square roots of a negative number. Okay, so if you cannot have a square root of a negative number. The second one is the square root is always a positive number. Okay, you cannot have a negative number. It's always positive. So that concludes the definition for the square root, and we could do some examples. Let's say square root of 121. That should we know that 121 is equal to what? 11 squared, right? And then this should give us 11. Now let's try square root of 25 over 81. Well, we know that 25 is 5 squared, right? 5 times 5 is 25, and 9 times 9 is 81, so 9 squared. So we can also write this as 5 over 9, the whole thing squared, right? So the square root of that will just simply be 5 over 9, okay? So, and let's try square root of 1 over 49. Well, this is equal to, you can say it's 1 over 7 squared. And then since square and square root is the opposite expression, they cancel out, it becomes 1 over 7. So you always pick the positive number. The answer is always positive. Okay? So that concludes the definition for the square root, and thank you for watching. Good luck in your studies.